the Republicans hope for taking over the governor's mansion. The choice is up to you.
This is Decision 2018, the race for governor. Tonight's moderators are 9 News anchor Kyle Clark and 9 News political reporter Brandon Rittiman.
Good evening, I'm Kyle Clark.
And I'm Brandon Rittiman. Welcome to this primary election debate in the Republican race for governor.
Earlier this week, the Democratic candidates debated here, and that debate can be seen in full on 9news.com.
Kyle and I alone chose the format and questions for tonight's debate. They have not been shared with the candidates in advance. We will have no opening statements. There will, however, be closing statements. Candidates will have 45 seconds to answer most of our questions tonight, and they will have a countdown clock visible to them.
We'll occasionally ask for a show of hands or a short answer, and our goal there is to highlight contrasts for voters rather than spend a lot of time on issues where all these gentlemen agree. We may be interjecting to restate the question if candidates choose not to answer directly.
And with that, let's get to it. I've got the first question. And today, Republican Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado teamed up with Democrat Elizabeth Warren, which some would call an unholy alliance of itself, to introduce a bill that would exempt states like Colorado from federal laws against marijuana. And just really quick to start us off, by show of hands, who on the stage here thinks that that bill is a good idea to allow Colorado to be exempt from federal prohibitions on marijuana? Nobody? All right. Mr. Robinson, I want to drill down with you just a little bit. You helped to launch a group called Smart Colorado, which bills itself as an advocate for safer policy around marijuana and children specifically. I do, however, recall the folks from Smart Colorado being pretty excited at an effort that happened in the state legislature to roll back Amendment 64 in the session after the voters passed it. So my question to you is, if there was a serious effort that got started to ask the voters to reconsider and go back on marijuana, would that campaign have you as a supporter?
I'd look at it at the time. I think that marijuana, there's been a lot of unintended consequences that have been bad for Colorado. We were promised when it came here that when we legalized it, that it would provide money for our schools and for our roads, that it would reduce the black market, that we would have less of our kids using it, and those things have just simply been not true. So,
what would your decision hinge on whether to support a question to voters to repeal legalized recreational marijuana?
I think we can do a better job. It is legal here today of putting safeguards on the industry. I applaud Governor Hickenlooper for what he did this week in vetoing some proposals that I think were bad. So we have to do a better job of educating our kids, getting the tax dollars that we were promised, and going after the black market.
But I think
we could lead on that.
Just so we're clear, it is possible you can envision a repeal effort that you would support and put your name on.
It is possible, yes.
All right. Anybody else feel that way?
I feel that way as well. I mean, I think that the horse has left the barn. When it comes to marijuana, I think right now the focus should be in making sure all the money, the marijuana tax revenue, hits directly into our public schools, which it was promised. It's basically been a bait and switch. And I've actually proposed to bring full transparency, accountability, and public scrutiny, put a website together in real time, pretty easy to put together, show exactly how much money is coming to the state and where it's going. But if there was strong public awareness that long-term that recreational marijuana is in the detriment of our kids and many others, I would strongly consider that as well a repeal effort, just on the recreational side, not on the medical side.
Yeah. Is there a recreational repeal either of you would be?
I would say there's 33 states now, Brandon, that have passed some form of recreational marijuana or medical marijuana, and a number of states will pass it after November as well. I think we have a big regulatory problem at the state level when it comes to medicinal marijuana and the fraud and abuse associated with medicinal marijuana. There's some counties, if you talk to Larry Walk at the Department of Public Health, that have a 50% price disparity between medical and retail marijuana. Some counties it's 30%, it varies. We have to fix that, and we have to distinguish between the CBD part of the plant, which is the most medically viable part of the plant, both for kids with epilepsy and NFL players who are suing because of inflammation, and the THC part of the plant that causes you to order Domino's and watch reruns of TV. Our medical cards don't distinguish between the CBD and the THC part of the plant, and we should.
Understood, but is there a repeal effort that you could see yourself supporting sometime down the line of recreation?
I don't think it's practical. I don't think it's practical.
I would say that, you know, there's nothing wrong in asking the Colorado residents again. I think now we've learned a lot about what marijuana has done to our communities, what marijuana has done in our schools, what marijuana has done to the fabric of Colorado. I don't think it's anything wrong in asking that question again. I voted against Amendment 64. I still believe it's not the right thing for Colorado, but I think it's important for us to go back to the residents of Colorado and ask them. You know, they're more informed. They understand what's happened. I think it's reasonable to always go back and ask that same question again.
So I'm hearing 3 of you say you might support a repeal effort, and Mr. Stapleton, you can't imagine one.
I'm interested in actually doing more as a governor to fix the regulatory model, so it's harder for an 18-year-old kid to get a medical marijuana card than it is for him or her to get a 6-pack of beer. Not making a value judgment, but that's, in today's Colorado, it's easier for an 18-year-old to get a medical card, and there's an incentive because you can be 18 and have a medical card versus having to be 21 to be a recreational buyer.
All right, I want to switch gears and talk about immigration just really quickly. There's been a lot of debate in the state legislature over the driver's license program for people who do not have legal status in this country. If the legislature sent you a bill that repealed that program just full out, would you sign it? We can go with show of hands. Who would sign it? Repeal bill. Your hand, is your hand up,
sorry,
Mr. Stapleton?
about
to repeal the driver's license program.
The driver's
for people
license
without
program, yes.
Legal status.
Absolutely.
All right. Pat?
Mr. Stapleton, you said that you're going to end sanctuary cities.
Yes.
And I haven't heard you say how you're going to do it, which mechanisms you're going to use. So obviously this is a home rule state where cities are given a lot of leeway. So what specifically would you do to end city policies in Denver, Aurora, Boulder, elsewhere?
So Kyle, this is a huge difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. In fact, if Jared Polis becomes the next governor of Colorado, Colorado will become a sanctuary state. It is actually in the Democratic Party platform to make Colorado a sanctuary state. That makes absolutely no sense. I'm proud to have the support of the head of the Colorado Sheriff's Association, the head of the Denver Police Union, and more than a dozen big sheriffs from all across Colorado, because they know that I have their back and will have their back as governor, and so they have my back.
Please?
And so here's what I would do. I would take state funds. I would restrict state funds from any city that declared itself a sanctuary city. I would take legal advice from my attorney in the governor's office and from the attorney general as to what I could do to cities specifically or individuals if it was constitutional as well to hold them liable.
Okay. You use most of your time not answering the question. I'm curious, what specific state funds would you withhold from sanctuary cities?
Any funds that were infrastructure funds that they relied on for the state, any funds that I could restrict, I would, from the state of Colorado to any city, whether it be Denver or Aurora, that declared themselves a sanctuary city.
So you would withhold like road and bridge funding from
Absolutely.
Denver if they...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Stapleton, you skipped our last debate where all of your opponents gave us some quick yes or no answers to a series of questions about immigration. I want to make sure that everybody's up to speed here. So there isn't a single law enforcement agency in Colorado that participates in the 287G program. That is the longtime program at the federal level, now run by the Trump administration, which has local law enforcement partner with the feds to enforce immigration policy. All 3 of your opponents said that they would order the Colorado State Patrol to participate. Would you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Robinson and Mr. Lopez said that they would send the Colorado National Guard down to the Mexican border if President Trump requested that. Mr. Mitchell said he would not. Yes or no? Would you?
Yes, he's the President of the United States.
Mr. Mitchell supports holding elected leaders of sanctuary cities civilly liable for those policies. Mr. Lopez and Mr. Robinson do not. Do you?
I don't know if that's constitutional. I would explore every avenue possible on the advice of the lawyers at the Attorney General's office and in the governor's office.
Sounds like you would if you could. Colorado has a population of people here illegally that's roughly the size of Fort Collins. In our last debate here, your opponents all agreed that the vast majority of those people living in Colorado illegally are not going to be deported. They all agreed that only people who are here illegally with criminal convictions should go. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think that our failure to fix immigration is a federal issue, from DACA to the federal government's inability to lead on immigration. Colorado, like a lot of states, has to deal with the federal government not being able to solve our immigration challenges. I'm interested.
They managed yes or no. So
here's what I'm
asking
interested.
You, what is the bar for deportation?
If somebody is a felon, they absolutely should be deported. If somebody's here illegally and they've and they can be proved, then we need to have a process for removing those people, because it's unfair to all the people that have legally gone through the process to become citizens or get their green cards.
So you're talking about removing people that do not have a criminal conviction, which is a step farther than anybody else here talked about.
But I'm interested primarily in solving sanctuary cities. Immigration is a federal problem.
And I'm interested in an answer to the question. My question is, who is going
I'm
to
not
be...
going to answer a hypothetical question. You can ask it 10 different ways. I'm going to tell you that I'm interested in sanctuary cities, which a proactive governor can and should do something about so we have a uniform policy. I'm not going to go into a hypothetical state versus federal government policy on immigration. I'm just not.
So it actually is an on-the-ground issue in terms of what you consider to be a sanctuary city, what types of offenses are reported to the federal government. This is the debate that's happening in cities and states across the country. So, and one big sticking point in this, from New York City to San Francisco, and we talked about it here in the last debate that you skipped, your opponents all agree that if somebody is here illegally and is picked up for drunk driving, as you were, that person should be deported. Do you agree with that?
If they were here legally and picked up
for drunk driving,
and they should be deported.
Stay or go if it's drunk driving.
I think that's I don't know. It's a case-by-case situation, I'd say. Case by case.
We would note that your opponents did provide a yes or no answer on that, as did every Democrat in the race.
Mr. Stapleton, I got one more for you. On the campaign trail, I'm sure you heard Mr. Lopez talk about how he's changed his life since his alcohol-fueled domestic violence incident in his past. I haven't heard you discuss how you've changed since your drunk driving arrest, so I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked Lopez. What's your relationship with alcohol today?
Absolutely. Nearly 20 years ago, when I was a young man in San Francisco, I made a mistake. I was honest about that mistake. I took responsibility for it, and I moved on. And when I first ran for office, that mistake was the subject of a TV ad by the Democrats. It was the subject of banner ads. In fact, it was the subject of my opponent's almost entire campaign. And the voters of Colorado didn't buy it back then, and they're not going to buy it today because they know it's a sideshow from the issues that matter. And the issues that matter are, what is Jared Polis going to do to the economic future of Colorado through a single-payer health care system that I was the co-chair of the effort with Governor Ritter to defeat, to supporting energy standards, which economists say will cost us $45 billion and send 230,000 jobs from Colorado. This is a sideshow, Brandon, and it's been vetted. And 10 years ago, when I first ran for statewide office.
And in fairness, Mr. Lopez gave a direct answer to this question. I asked you to describe your relationship with alcohol right now.
Responsible, because I'm a father of 3 kids, 10, 6, and 4.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say, I don't think this is a sideshow.
Unlike you, I'm not a home brewer.
We've gone right into that. We're going to move on. This week, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in favor of a baker in Lakewood who refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple, as you all know. The court blasted the Colorado Civil Rights Commission for being hostile towards religion, but the court also preserved Colorado's anti-discrimination law. Can you raise your hand if you think that the court got that ruling just right? Okay, I see 4. You all feel that the court got that just right. Very well. Colorado's public accommodation law makes it illegal for a business to turn you away on several factors: race, nationality, color, disability, religion, marital status, sex, and sexual orientation. If the legislature sent you a bill that repealed sexual orientation from that list, would you sign it, and why or why not? And Mr. Lopez, we'll start with you.
You know, if they sent me that bill, I probably would not sign it. Okay? And the reason being is, look, I am a strong believer in the Constitution of the United States, where religion is protected, where we practice our religion. I think that is one of the things that we can never give up, is the rights that we have as Americans, the rights that our founding fathers gave us to our country, because that's what makes America great. And when we start moving around and playing games with our Constitution, I think it takes us down a very dangerous path. I think we need to respect our religion. I think we need to respect our Constitution. And I would be somewhat surprised if the General Assembly was able to pass a bill to come to my desk for signature. I think we need to stand tall to what we believe, specifically when it comes to our religion.
All right, but you're not interested in getting rid of that from the list. Mr. Mitchell?
I mean, I would not agree. I don't like the idea of discriminating against somebody based on their sexual orientation. I think the Colorado Civil Rights Commission was way out of line in bringing this lawsuit. I mean, we have become so litigious as a society. There were thousands of other cake shops that could have made that same cake, and it wouldn't have been a violation of the owner's religious beliefs. And that's the path we should have gone down. We have to start figuring out how to resolve our differences without going into court, taking it all the way up to the Supreme Court. I think it was a way overreach.
You believe in the protection for sexual orientation, but you think it was an overreach in how it was applied.
Of course, when you have thousands of other options that this couple could have gone to, and they chose to go to the one baker in which had a religious objection to it, a conscionable religious objection to it, then that just shows you how litigious we've really become. We've got to start dealing with our problems more effectively. You know, my background as an entrepreneur, I build companies. We never had a single labor dispute in 32 years.
Okay.
You can actually resolve things without having to go to court.
Mr. Robinson, a bill that would repeal sexual orientation from the list of protected classes, would you sign it?
I wouldn't sign it. So we want to protect all people, and we don't discriminate against people, but we also need to allow religious people to practice their religion. And that what was good about this ruling from the Supreme Court is it said basically that the Colorado, that they overstepped their bounds. They went after him. They were hostile towards his religious views. We can't allow that either. So I would not sign that bill.
Mr. Stapleton, same question.
I wouldn't sign it. I think what the essence of the decision is that no one deserves to be discriminated against, including people of faith. And because of my faith, I believe that all people are God's children, and I'm going to let the guy upstairs make determinations on who gets to join him, not me.
Thank you all.
Mr. Lopez, when you've been asked during this campaign for policy positions, you like to say that you're going to get everybody in the room and you're going to have a discussion and let the best idea win. And at first that sounds like a commitment to collaboration, but then at some point it sounds like you don't have a lot of policy ideas. Your executive experience was being the mayor of Parker when Parker was about 1/5 the size it is now. Why are you sufficiently prepared for the job of governor?
Well, first of all, I think you need to understand that Parker was a strong mayor form of government. I was the mayor and the city manager at the same time. So all decisions pertaining to transportation, growth, zoning, platting, all those issues I had to deal with. You know, when you talk about policies, you know, it's one thing to come in with an idea and share how you're going to do things. But until you're in the belly of the beast, you really won't know how things operate. I've learned from experience that it's better to watch and bring in information before you make a firm decision on where you're going to move. And I think that's what the people want. They want someone that is reasonable, thoughtful, looks at all the totality of the situation, and makes decisions based on the future, not what's happening today.
Mr. Lopez, thank you. Mr. Stapleton, you have cast yourself as the leading voice for reforming PARA, the state's pension system. But you didn't attend PARA's board meeting this year when they reviewed the final legislative reforms. And when the legislature was debating this late into the night, you were nowhere to be found. I mean, the governor was down there. He was personally making the case. You later told Colorado Public Radio you were asleep. Was it a lack of energy or interest or what?
That was my poor attempt at a joke, Kyle. I think, you know, the amazing thing is that in today's world, you can attend meetings by attending over the phone. Our office was represented at that meeting. It was a last meeting. It was a last-minute meeting that was called over, I think, with a 2 or 3 day notice. It lasted about 15 minutes, and we already knew exactly what the content of the meeting was. I've been the largest and the loudest and the longest voice for reforming PARA. Everybody knows that I've been the most activist treasurer in Colorado history. I sued the pension system for transparency. Everything that I've said has come true. I voted in 2 contentious votes, 8 to 7 votes, to lower the rate of return twice, which wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been the treasurer. I predicted that unless we fix this system, we would have faced a credit downgrade, which we ultimately would have. And I'm glad that the legislature incorporated some of my ideas. And if you talk to the leadership in the legislature, they'll say that they all talked to me the night that the bill was done.
Did you not tell Colorado Public Radio that you were not lobbying Republicans to vote against that?
I said it passed at 5 of 12, and most people were asleep at that time. But
so
I was.
When you were
if you
talking
talk
to people, you were saying vote yes,
Jack
vote
Tate,
no?
I was saying at the end of the day I would sign the bill and I would be in favor of it, because the cost of doing nothing, both in terms of getting a downgrade from S&P, which we would have gotten. Our office had a meeting, a conference call scheduled with them, and the cost, which was articulated by the head of PARA's board, Tim O'Brien, would be at least $1.5 billion between this legislative session that just concluded and the next one. And so in this case, the cost of doing nothing outweighed the cost of actually acting and solving this system and shoring it up with another unfortunate incremental fix.
Treasurer Stapleton, I heard from legislators that were down there that you were calling them and texting them that night of the debate, telling them to vote against it. And
okay, that's a question. Let him answer the question.
No, I'm not going to respond to that.
I'll ask you. Were you calling and texting legislators telling them to vote?
No, I was not.
Okay.
And I invite any legislator to come forward forward with that because that was not the case.
Mr. Mitchell, I've got the next question. It's for you. You've been attacking Mr. Stapleton as a never-Trumper. Isn't that hypocritical, seeing as how you didn't vote for President Trump? And how does your position on President Trump differ than Mr. Stapleton's right now?
You know, that's not true. First of all, I've been running contrast ads that are completely factual, not
What's the contrast is my question.
Contrast ads is his background versus my background.
On Trump?
Sure. I
You're
didn't.
calling him a never-Trumper. You say you didn't vote for Donald Trump.
He's George Bush's cousin. This
What's
is
that
Mitt
got to
Romney's
do with your
nephew.
vote on Donald Trump?
They ran the Never Trump movement. They formed it. I'm not sure if a single family member in his entire family voted for Trump.
I'm related to plenty of people with different politics than me.
And I'm not even sure if even Walker voted for Trump. But so you understand that he has been running attack ads against me. We didn't instigate this at all. So this is just simply a counter.
I'm not talking about who started it. I'm talking about you didn't vote for Donald Trump, and you're attacking him as the guy who's not friendly enough to Donald Trump.
The fact I didn't vote for Donald Trump doesn't mean that I don't support the president, which I do, and I support many of his policies. And I've never criticized the president. I've been many people call me the nice Donald Trump. Some of the media has actually said that as well. So, I think it's kind of humorous on the thing. But, this is really, I don't really like the tenor of where this discussions are going. I mean, we're facing serious challenges in our state. We're not able to talk about para. I have a very different para plan than Walker has. I hope we'll have an opportunity to get into things like health care and para.
I'm going to give you one more
things.
try, though. We're going to have a lot of topics to get to, but I'm going to give you one more try. What is the contrast you're trying to draw for voters about your position on Donald Trump?
The contrast is that he's being a hypocrite by attacking me for not voting for Donald Trump when his entire family didn't vote for him, when he's raising millions of dollars from people that are never Trump people. He's going to W's Ranch. You've got Mitt Romney out here a couple weeks ago running a huge fundraiser for you. All these people were all part of the Never Trump movement, and they're attacking me where all their money and all this special interest money is coming into their campaign.
Just quickly.
Really quickly, Mr. Robinson.
Victor called me that summer before the nomination and asked for a personal introduction to Mitt Romney so that he could get support for the Never Trump movement that he was leading. So I don't know where he's getting this information.
Completely not true.
And Mr. Stable, I'll give you one quick.
I'll say, look, Vic created the first negative ad. It was a tennis ad, animated. It was actually pretty funny, Vic. But our ads have been substantive on the fact that Vic did not vote for President Trump. He actually donated to President Trump's opponent. He was an Evan McMullen guy. And when he was a state rep, he voted to raise taxes and fees nearly 20 times.
All right, we're veering off topic.
As a legislator. So that
I
is
know
not
you could unload a
that is
cannon
not
here, so we're gonna
career as a Republican. So he maybe he should have debated a couple days earlier. So that's what the basis of our attacks are.
I will say there's absolutely
good
nothing richer than running an attack ad and then saying we're not talking about the issues. So this is a great demonstration of the next thing that we want to talk about. Mr. Robinson, question for you. So by all accounts, you are a friendly, mild-mannered guy, traditional conservative values, and no scandals. So not exactly a formula for success in Republican politics these days.
I think it is.
I know that you know the saying, nice guys finish last, and I'm not predicting that you finish in fourth here. But what specifically makes you think that you can connect with a Republican base that clearly wants fire and fury?
So I have some fire and fury. I have lived my life in a way that has stood up for conservative values and brought people forward. I've done more outside the system to make a difference for Coloradans, being significantly involved and having a significant influence on over 15 pieces of legislation, making Coloradans' lives better. And, those are the things that matter. And so I have shown that I've lived conservative principles. I can lead this state. I have done more to make Coloradans' lives better than any of these opponents on the stage.
Mr. Robinson, thank you very much. So you all talk about bringing change to state government, and I'm curious whether any of you think that you are going to encounter a similar problem to what President Trump says that he has encountered at the federal level. I'm talking about the deep state. Do any of you believe that, similar to President Trump's claim about the federal government, that Colorado's rank-and-file state workers are infiltrated by agents of the deep state that will oppose you once you're elected? A show of hands if you believe there's a deep state within Colorado government. Mr. Lopez. So
I mean, that's such an unfair question the way you phrased it, because you're painting this in a very narrow sense. I don't think the deep state is our local state workers, but we do have a deep state. Do you know that we have every sheriff's office in our state keeps investigative files on people that were simply accused of something, never charged or anything? So that would be, in my opinion, is a deep state. We do have deep state. I think that the government is too big. It's too intrusive. It's too overreaching. has too much power. I want to shrink government. I want to have
There's
more.
a difference between shrinking government and thinking that there's agents who are secretly working against you, as the president says are happening on the federal level. It's the president's definition, actually, the president that you vocally support. Mr. Lopez, do you believe that there are state workers who are secretly working against Republican leaders?
I believe that there's a mindset within state government, okay, where there are individuals that because they're so passionate about their values, they're so passionate about their beliefs, that there is oftentimes ways for them to put obstacles in the way of moving forward. So I do believe that there are some. Am I saying that the entire state employee base is that? No. But you asked a very specific question, and I'm going to tell you that I truly believe there are some components of that. I can't tell you how big until I get into the belly of the beast.
I appreciate the direct answer.
All right. Hey, Colorado voters may get the chance to decide on 2 different plans to fund a few $1 billion of pretty badly needed transportation work in the state. One of those would raise the sales tax and pay for a mix of state and local projects, some transportation, some roads. The other raises no new taxes but tells legislature just go find the money, and it can only go to roads. Which do you support, if any, and why? Mr. Mitchell will start.
Well, I don't support any new taxes, any new debts, any new fees. I put up a very specific plan to reform our Colorado Department of Transportation. That includes getting $2 billion directly into roads and infrastructure. And it includes reforming the bureaucracy, which is frankly today one of the most most poorly managed bureaucracies in state government. I want to limit their total overhead to 20% and get $700 million a year directly into contractors' hands, the people who actually build our infrastructure. I want to change to performance-based auditing in our state legislative committee.
So you've nixed the Chamber of Commerce question with the tax. There's also the Independence Institute question that basically says lawmakers go find the money. Would you be happy inheriting that as governor?
You know, if it passes, of course, it'd be a debt relief package of, I think, including interest, about $5.2 billion. I'm strongly opposed to this. I know Walker and Doug are in support of this. I'm strongly opposed to this.
We're going to ask them next.
Yes, but no, I think obviously if it's passed by the voters, I'm going to uphold the Constitution.
But you'd rather it not.
I strongly do not believe we need that money. I think it's going to go down a black hole. CDOT has a long history of waste and inefficiency. We need a reformer to take care of that.
Mr. Robinson, same question. Those 2 ballot questions on transportation funding.
Great questions, and we have to fix our roads. Our roads are terrible. We're waiting in them way too long in the metro area. They are terrible around the state, and so I'm glad to see that there's suddenly some focus on this issue. It's clear to me exactly what we need to do, and it is not a sales tax increase that is regressive, hurting those that need the help the most. We have to do exactly what Bill Owens did 20 years ago, and that's go to the people and borrow the money. So I am in favor of what's been put forward by the Independent Institute. I don't think it's quite enough. I think we need a little bit more, over $3 billion, to really make a difference in widening I-25 in both directions, improving I-70 mountain access, and projects around the state.
But a start you'd be happy with. Mr. Stapleton,
Yes.
same question.
Solving our infrastructure needs, Brandon, is a major reason I'm running for governor, because we can do better and we must. And if we elect Jared Polis in November, we're not going to be able to find a single dime for infrastructure, because his single-payer health care will bankrupt Colorado. His renewable energy standard will put the energy industry completely out of business in our state.
But this time, Jared Polis doesn't have a ballot question, so what about the 2 that might be there?
He represents the Democrat thinking on this, which is when there's a problem, just raise taxes and have the taxpayers bail us out of it. And no, I wouldn't support the sales tax increase, because less than 50 cents on the dollar will actually go to roads. If you look at our overall spending, we spent $1 billion more last year in overall spending on public transit and RTD, which are really important, but they serve 2.5% of our population. Roads and bridges serves the other 97.5%. And I would support the Independence Institute's effort, but I do think more is necessary for bonding. We need some dedicated sources of revenue in the general fund that we can use for bonding, including cutting executive overhead, fixing the fraud and abuse with medicinal marijuana, and putting every last dime we can towards infrastructure, because there's nothing that's more important for the economic future of this state.
Mr. Stapleton, thank you. Mr. Lopez, around the horn to you. Those 2 ballot questions.
You know, I would not support the Denver Metro's Chamber's effort to increase the sales tax.
Fair enough.
I would support the Independence Institute approach, because here's what it does. It forces legislatures to do their job. It forces public officials to look at the budget and evaluate what is the most important component that we need to focus in when we move forward into the future. This is something that we haven't really had before. And what is wrong in having those elected officials truly make those hard decisions? Because that's what we need to do every single day. when we go run for office, we tell you that we're going to make decisions. It's important for us to always make sure that we listen to what the people want and make sure that we make good decisions. So I would definitely encourage that proposition.
All right, Mr. Lopez, thanks. We actually are going to give you guys all a chance to catch your breath because, as we mentioned at the top of the show, independent voters, unaffiliated is how it's formally named on your ballot. They have the right to vote in one-party primary this year, either the Republicans you're watching now or the Democrats who went on Monday. Here's a little catch-up on how it all works. If you registered with a party, you'll get that party's ballot in the mail, just like normal. It's too late to change it now. If you registered with no party, they call that unaffiliated, you can expect to get 2 ballots, one for Republicans, one for Democrats, but you're only allowed to cast 1. I repeat, you can only cast 1 ballot. That's why they give you 1 envelope. If you turn in both, your vote will not count. You can handle most voter registration stuff online in Colorado. Just go to govotecolorado.com. There, you can check your registration, update it, or register for the first time, but don't put that off. That's govotecolorado.com. For drop-off locations, in-person voting, or more information, check with your county clerk. Vote early, not often, but make sure you vote by primary election day. It's Tuesday, June 26th. The polls close at 7 p.m.
Welcome back. Denver's power players, including Governor Hickenlooper and Denver Mayor Michael Hancock, want to bring the 2013 Winter Olympic Games to Colorado.
2030.
2030. Thank you very much. I was about to say that's way back. Here we go. 2030 Winter Games. By a show of hands, do you support bringing them to Colorado?
It's not a yes or no question.
Yeah. It actually is a yes or no question, and it will be posed as a yes or no question to Colorado voters, which is why I asked it to you like that. But since you're opposed to the idea, let's explore why.
Well,
so people are going to get a yes or no question, Mr. Mitchell. So that's the reason why I asked you a yes or no question.
Or no answer.
Mr. Robinson, let's talk about your apprehension over the games. Is there anything that the IOC and the organizers could convince you to get on board with that effort?
Absolutely. They could say that no taxpayer dollars are going to be thrown into these games. If they said that, absolutely bring them on. This could be a good thing for Colorado. We would welcome the games. So that is the condition that I would put.
So just to note, in the past, the IOC has never been willing to guarantee that taxpayers won't be on the hook in the long run. That's being proposed by the exploratory committee this time, but there's no guarantee. Mr. Stapleton, anything that could get you on board?
Kyle, I would need a guarantee of no public financing. As a business guy, I need to make sure that it actually made money and penciled for us, because there's no point in having the games, even though they'd be awesome, by saddling us with more debt.
The exploratory committee says let's go out and take private donations to buy insurance, so then if there are cost overruns, the insurance pays for it.
If that works, and if taxpayers aren't on the hook, and it can be proved to me that that works, and the games aren't going to lose money for taxpayers for a bailout, then I would consider supporting it.
Mr. Lopez, any scenario that you could support bringing the Olympics here in 2030?
Not at all. You know, I see this nothing more than a vote of the urban corridor, putting pressures on the mountain towns. You know, I'm about 64 counties. You know, destroying or disturbing the quality of life for a number of years because we want to bring some type of feather in our cap. I think Colorado already has a lot to offer. I don't think we need the Olympics to showcase how beautiful Colorado is for our future.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Mitchell, any conceivable way you could support the 2030 games?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we should absolutely at least look at it. I think it's pretty exciting. It could be pretty cool, and it could really increase our exposure as a state. It has to be done cost feasibly. We have to make sure it doesn't turn into a boondoggle. We saw Utah did it very, very well. I mean, Doug's Uncle Mitt did an extremely terrific job with that. Today, it's still paying dividends all these years later. And then, of course, you know, we've had countries like Yugoslavia that basically bankrupted their whole country. We have a tortured history on this, of course. In 1976, we won the games, and then we turned the games back. So, but I'm pretty excited about that. If there was a possible way it could be done in a public and private sector manner, it could be done cost feasibly. It doesn't become a boondoggle on the taxpayers. It was open to all of our citizens. I think it would be pretty cool.
And then a quick follow-up. We need to move on to something else, but a quick follow-up. Again, this is a yes or no. Right now, the exploratory committee is saying that Colorado should vote on this, but a non-binding resolution. Not really sure what that means. I asked the Democrats on Monday. All 4 were in favor of making it a binding resolution so Coloradans could say yes or no to the Olympics. Show of hands, would you support a real up or down vote on the Olympics for Coloradans?
Absolutely.
Maybe no
If my prior
muddy.
answers
Yes,
were
exactly. I mean, you're
if there were
asking-
answers to my questions, absolutely up or down vote. Yes.
Okay, all right, very good. We will we'll move on to a question about gun policy.
Yeah, so there's been a little bit of confusion over where all of you stand on the red flag bill that was defeated this year in the state legislature. This is the bill designed to take guns out of the hands of people deemed by a judge to be a danger to either themselves or others. First off, by a show of hands, did any of you support that bill as it was written? I see you almost raising your hand.
supported,
Okay.
yes. So I
You
supported
the bill that was in the legislature.
Well, it needed some very basic changes to make sure that due process protections were in place. And those protections weren't put in place, and so I was okay with it failing. But yes, I did support the bill.
And I did too as well.
Similar.
I mean, I was very specific on the changes that needed to be made. I think it should be clear and convincing evidence in order to get the order. I don't think it should have been undone on an ex-parte basis. I think the accused should have been notified. Also, if it's a false allegation, I think there should have been shifting attorney's fees so the accused ultimately gets their monies back for being falsely accused. And finally, it should have been, the file should be expunged or otherwise sealed if in fact it was a false allegation. Those were all reasonable compromises made, but I do support, even though I have an A+ rating from the NRA, I've never taken a dime from the organization, and I actually have a voting record supporting the Second Amendment. I think extreme risk protection orders are needed. We are in a mental health crisis.
I want to make sure we
like
get a
we've
chance
never
to hear from everyone on this because you both outlined sort of what would earn your support on a bill like that. Very quickly.
Very quickly, we have to lead on this. We have seen Republicans have to lead. We know the Democrats' plan to take away guns. This is a sensible thing that we can do to keep our schools safer.
Appreciate it. Mr. Stapleton, is there any version of a red flag bill you could support, and what would get you over the line if that was the case?
Well, Vic, just a point of clarification, you have a 0 rating from the NRA because you didn't answer any of their questionnaires. So, yes, that's absolutely the case. I did not support this bill. I agree with the intent and the spirit of the bill, but the fact of the matter is it was rushed. I've never seen a bill in the last 10 days of the legislative session that took into account everything it could or should have. In this particular case, due process was applied arbitrary and unevenly. The waiting period of 182 days, which was then amended to a court hearing, didn't seem to make sense. The penalties for false accusations didn't seem to make sense. If you talk to county commissioners, they will tell you there's a county attorney already in place to adjudicate issues at the court level to take guns. And finally, Senate Bill 270, which Tim Neville and Sherry John sponsored, a bipartisan bill, helps coordination between mentally ill people and law enforcement, and that to me made a lot more sense.
With those changes you outlined, you could support a version of a red flag bill then?
I think 270 made a lot more sense. I'd have to see what comes up in future legislative sessions.
No solid answer there. Mr. Lopez, same question to you. Is there a version of a red flag bill out there you could get behind?
You know, first of all, I voted against it. I went across and I went publicly and said this is wrong. Because the question you asked, would you have supported it the way it was written? And the way it was written, it was not a good bill by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, and I'm following up now to ask, is there a version you could?
You know what? I would have to sit down with the legislatures and look at this because there's a lot of concerns that we do have. But remember, I'm telling you that I support the Constitution of the United States and due process. If there was a way that we could guarantee that someone would not arbitrarily accuse someone before they even commit a crime and have them lose their rights, you know, that is something that we need to be very careful of. Right now, I want to tell you that I don't see a path, but that doesn't mean there isn't a path.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Stapleton, you have a campaign ad which makes the false claim that you were the only state treasurer with the courage to endorse President Trump's tax plan. And your defense for the false claim is that you just took it off a press release from President Trump and apparently did not Google to see if it was true. And everybody makes mistakes. What have you learned from this one?
Well, listen, Kyle, I supported the president's tax plan in December. Whether I was the only treasurer or one of the only treasurers, I was the only treasurer that was included in the official White House press release, and I did not take the time you did to caucus all my colleagues. And what the point is not the semantics of whether I was one of the first or the first. The point is what the tax plan is actually going to do for Colorado. And it's going to provide, hold on a second here.
No, this
hold
is
on a second.
Question.
No.
It's not about the tax plan, sir, because
yes, it is.
the tax plan, I'm
it's
sure,
about
was
giving
supported by everybody else up clear.
of Colorado's
I'm asking
tax
you
relief.
about whether you've learned anything about being caught making a false claim.
No, I actually have not, because I don't think the semantics of being one of the first or the first are really meaningful. What's meaningful is a piece of legislation, and we were the only treasurer that was listed on the official White House press release, Kyle, and that's why we said the only.
Okay.
So.
All right. Very good. Just in fairness, it only took a few minutes of calling around the country and people were laughing at your claim. And these are Republican treasurers.
Well,
I'm just curious. You
I'm
seem
happy,
to not be bothered at all
that there's
about
other treasurers.
the
I'm not
false
bothered
claim.
at all because what matters is what the tax plan is going to do for Colorado.
Okay. All right.
What matters is that
point.
it's going to be $4 billion of economic
Mr.
impact.
Lopez, a question for you. I've heard you discuss the lack of religious values as what you see as a causal factor, or at least a contributing factor in the school shootings that we have seen. I'm curious how that meshes with the role of a governor. Would you seek to create some type of religious or faith revival in Colorado as governor?
You know, I think the governor has a responsibility, a moral responsibility, to talk about how it's important for us to value life and how it's important for us to take care of each other and make sure that we're not treating life like it's nothing. You know, I think the governor does have a responsibility to talk about some of the things that we know bind us together, and that is taking care of each other. You know, and when we don't talk about that, it makes it sound like God doesn't matter. It makes it sound like God has no role in our society. Our founding fathers built this country on divine intervention. And I think it's important for us as a people to talk about how important it is to take care of each other. And if we don't talk about that, this is the types of ramifications that we end up finding in the school system.
It doesn't sound so much like maybe values rooted in religion, but not religiosity per se. It sounds like what you're describing. You're just talking about community values.
Yes, I'm talking about we have to make sure that people understand the value of life.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
All right, I have a question for the whole group here. Why do you think, thinking back to 2016, that Donald Trump lost the state of Colorado, and how does that inform your strategy trying to beat the Democratic nominee if you were to become the Republican nominee? And we'll start with you, Mr. Robinson.
So he lost the state of Colorado because he didn't have the support of independents and conservatives and others to come together and rally around his ideas that he was putting forward. So I think we need somebody in this election who has the competence to really lead, has shown that competence, has the character that is going to really not have character attacks. Those things Coloradans care about. They care about the baggage in our background. They want somebody that doesn't have that baggage, that can lead. And so I think I present that alternative, present that opportunity that I can bring independents on board. I can withstand so that the Democrats' fire is not on things that we've done in the past. It's on, we're talking about issues, about things that really matter for Coloradans.
Mr. Stapleton, same question to you. Why did Donald Trump lose Colorado, and what are you going to do different?
I think an election for governor, that's a great question, Brandon, is really a 10th Amendment issue. It's states' rights. You elect a powerful, proactive chief executive as governor, and he or she makes life better for the people at the state level. Because no matter what happens in Washington, D.C., the federal government's not going to solve our infrastructure challenges. They're not going to figure out how to make Medicaid sustainable from a budget standpoint. And so, listen, I'm getting to my point here.
Okay.
And so I will work with Washington. I think it's important for Colorado to be supportive of the president. It's important for our country to be supportive. And that's why what I did with the tax plan, which will have $4 billion plus of positive economic impact. But on other issues like tariffs, I'm concerned about the impact to our agriculture industry. And so I think it's important, equally important for a governor to stand up on those issues.
All right, you're out of time, but are you trying to tell me that you don't think there's anything to be learned in the governor's race from what happened with the Trump campaign?
I'm telling you that it's the responsibility of a governor to work with Washington to make life better for people in the state of Colorado when it makes sense, and to stand up to Washington when they advocate policies that are going to make things less advantageous for the economic future of our state.
And I also didn't hear an answer to the first question, which is why do you think that Donald Trump lost Colorado?
Well, I'm not a pundit, so I'm not going to engage in punditry.
All right, not going to answer the question. Fair enough. Mr. Lopez, why did Donald Trump lose? Does it inform you to do anything differently?
He lost because his message didn't connect. It didn't connect with enough voters here in Colorado. His message was off. You know, it's 2 years later. I'm about messaging. I'm about connecting with all the voters of Colorado, focusing on what are the issues that are impacting the families of Colorado. You know, can you learn something? Sure you can. You know, basically, if you don't connect with the voters, if they don't feel that you care about them, if they don't feel that you really care about their families and their future, there's really no reason for them to support you. I think that was the biggest fallacy or the biggest misstep that the president made. You know, for me, I'm a totally different person. You know, I can connect with people. I think that's why I'm here today, is my message is resonating.
Mr. Mitchell, why do you think Donald Trump lost the state of Colorado? And what does it inform you to do?
Well, I mean, we have different demographics in other states he's won, but I'm certainly not a political prognosticator. But I can tell you why I'm the best candidate to win and why my campaign is very different than Donald Trump's campaign, even though we have similar backgrounds. First and foremost, I have roughly 50,000 Facebook supporters. Roughly a third of them are registered unaffiliated. We have very conservative supporters. We have very moderate supporters. We actually have a good amount of Democrats, if you can believe that, have changed their party affiliation to join our movement. We've done 600 grassroots events, almost 300 of them in rural communities, economically challenged communities. We have by far and away the broadest base of support. We've also been the only candidate that's refused any and all special interest money, so that people know that I'll always put Coloradans first. We put forward the biggest and boldest and different ideas on a host of issues to take on our bureaucracies as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. So there is a story that we did the other day that really got people talking, and it is about this collaboration between the Hickenlooper administration and some high-tech businesses to advertise to Californians, trying to convince them to move to Colorado to take high-tech jobs. Some state money's going into this, some business money's going into this. Mr. Stapleton, I'm going to hear from everybody on this concept. What do you think about the idea of advertising to Californians to move here?
Sure. Other states have advertised to leave Colorado, especially our ski industry with respect to Utah. So that's been done by other states to us, and I'd be happy to do it. It's important that we elect a Republican governor, though, in November and not Jared Polis, because there is no way to pay for what he's proposing, Kyle, from a single-payer health care system to renewable energy standards to the repeal. Listen, Kyle, just last week he authored a bill to try and repeal President Trump's tax plan. That's going to, because he ultimately wants to raise our taxes, because there's no way to pay for what Jared Polis is proposing other than to have a massive state income tax increase. I would argue that most of the people are interested in moving to Colorado from places like California because they are overregulated and overtaxed. And so it is very important and not a pivot that we don't elect Jared Polis.
The name
or
of the
else we will
campaign
become California
is
without
actually,
the water.
The name of the campaign
Without
is
the
Pivot
water.
to Colorado. So maybe you're channeling that.
So,
Mr. Mitchell, the idea of convincing Californians to move here.
I think that's a good idea. We have to make sure it's smart growth, though. I mean, that's why I think we need to really focus on bridging the urban and rural economic divide in our state, which is very, very much real. I know you know that, Kyle. Many people don't know that who live here in the corridor. I was recently in Crowley County, and a woman said to me, you know, she was crying to me, and she said her daughter's graduating from CSU, and it's the only home she's ever known, and she now doesn't want to come back to the only community she's ever known because there's really nothing there for her. I think 100% of our economic incentives should be earmarked towards economically challenged communities. Companies can go from 20 to 30 employees. Companies can go from 100 to 150 employees. Companies that have good balance sheets, good history of treating their employees well, can operate effectively in rural communities like agribusinesses and distribution companies, possibly some certain high-tech manufacturers. But that's where our money, our advertising, and our economic incentives should be earmarked.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Robinson, you know what this is getting at for people. There is an anxiety amongst a lot of Coloradans that they are missing out on the boom. They're missing out on the benefits that our economy is providing for a lot of people, and now there's outsiders coming in. What do you say to them? What do you think of the state campaign?
So I don't think the state should be using state monies to pay for this. I absolutely understand where these businesses are coming from. I recently met with 25 CEOs. The number one technology CEOs, the number one issue they said was being able to find qualified workers in Colorado. We are simply bringing people here. We are not doing a better or a good enough job to teach our kids the skills that they need. That's why I started myself a nonprofit called Kids Tech that has taught over 15,000 kids technology jobs exactly to address this issue. So I don't blame these CEOs at all. I would do the same thing in their shoes. They have every right to try to fill these jobs. But you know what? It speaks to us not doing a good enough job of reaching out and building our kids' knowledge so that they could fill those jobs here. That is a key part of my plan. We have to educate our kids and make them ready for the jobs.
Mr. Robinson, thank you. So, Mr. Lopez, I think there's some pretty broad agreement here that you want to be able to lift up people in Colorado. What is your specific plan to do that, and what do you think of the state's plan to bring in some folks from California who have these skills?
You know, I think it sends the wrong message. I think the message it is sending is we don't have faith in our own children. We don't have faith in the people here in Colorado to be able to fulfill these jobs. You know, for a CEO to say, I have to go outside the state to find good talent, I'd rather challenge that CEO and say, how long do you think it would take for you to develop that talent here in Colorado? Because when you're saying that we don't have any good people here that can join in the economic recovery or be a part of that we need. There's 64 counties, and in technology, you should be able to work and live wherever you want and still be able to contribute. So I would much rather see the state put their investment in helping our young men and women be a part of that economy, not asking people to come to move to Colorado, because I think it's wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
All right, we're getting very tight for time, so I'm going to be a little bit on you at the end of this one. But I did hear some differences last debate about public-private partnerships, toll roads, that sort of thing. I want to hear you on these tax incentives for big businesses like Amazon with its second headquarters coming here. Where do you draw the line on offering a company tax incentives to come to Colorado? Mr. Stapleton, we'll start with you.
So I talked to the Denver Business Journal about this months ago, and we have a plan. Colorado has a plan that's been an effective plan that offers tax incentives to companies no matter what their size, based on headcount and based on the money that they actually demonstrably bring to our state. And so I'm in favor of that, whether it's Amazon or a small or medium-sized business. It's not a giveaway. I'm certainly not for giving Amazon money to incentivize them to move here, but earned tax credits based on employees that get hired and based on the size of the company and the money that they're actually bringing into Colorado makes sense.
All right. Thank you very much. Mr. Lopez, same with you.
You know, I wouldn't give any incentives. You know, I think we'd have to look at it a case-by-case basis. But you know what? If you have a company in here that's wanting to move and grow and become a part of the community, become a part of the state, you know, I truly believe that Amazon's and those big corporations, all they're doing is shopping a deal. And if you don't give them the right deal, they'll move on. I don't think they truly care about the community, and they truly don't care about the state. I'd much rather see smaller companies that are expanding that can convince me that they're here for the long haul. They are here to make sure that they are become a fabric of the state. If they can convince me of that they can convince me that they're going to hire and stay here long term, I think we can have some good discussions about what type of incentives we can give them.
Mr. Mitchell, where do you draw the line on tax incentives?
Well, first of all, no, earned tax incentives, TIFs, any other type of economic incentives are all one and the same. That's corporate welfare. And not one penny, not one red cent of taxpayer money, your money, my money, any Coloradan's money should be going to Amazon.com. And this is a company that's worth almost $1 trillion. Can you believe this? This is a company that their stock gyrations each day more than $1 billion, something like $5 to $10 billion a day. Their stock moves each day. The $1 billion or whatever we're offering them is not going to be meaningful to them. So 100% of our economic incentives should go exactly what I said earlier to companies where it actually can make a big difference in their businesses. It could be strategic types of businesses, but it should be earmarked 100% towards economic challenge communities. I much than Walker on this issue.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Robinson, same question.
So we want good companies to come and locate in Colorado, and this is a tool that we can use. And so in the right way, on a balanced way, absolutely, we should incent companies to come here. But it speaks to our bigger problem. We have to incent them by having workers that are prepared for the jobs of the future, and we're not doing a good enough job around that.
All right, Mr. Robinson, thank you. Just a few seconds before we begin our closing statements, a couple quick show of hands questions if we have time. If there's a home rule municipality in Colorado that wants to limit its growth, its new population through limiting new water taps for developers or residential construction caps, would you be supportive, by show of hands, of a local city or town doing that? No across the board. Let's talk about gun policy one more time. By a show of hands, if the legislature, suppose both halves controlled by Democrats, brings you a bill banning so-called assault weapons, like the very popular AR-15, would you veto that by a show of hands?
I would veto that.
Okay, all four would veto. Thank you very much.
It is time now for our 1-minute closing statements. The order was selected randomly by the computer, believe it or not. Mr. Lopez, you are up first.
You know, I truly believe that the job of the governor is to promote, protect, and preserve the various economies and the different ways of life that make Colorado the great state that it is. There are 64 counties in the state of Colorado. It's not all about Denver, and it's not all about Boulder. It's about all of us, not just some of us. You know, as I travel the state, I hear from a lot of different individuals about the challenges that we're facing. And there isn't a divide. There's a divide between rural Colorado and urban Colorado. But we need a governor that truly understands how to unite, how to bring people together, how to find solutions, how to not play politics, but let's do things that really matter for the future of Colorado, a future that we can all be proud of, because we know there's challenges every single day that we're facing. And it's important for all of us to become statesmen, to understand that it's okay to disagree, and agree that we need to move forward. My name is Greg Lopez. I ask for your support. Go to my website, lopezforgovernor.com. Get more information on where I stand.
All right. Mr. Stapleton, the floor is yours.
I'm running for governor of Colorado for 3 really important reasons. My kids, Craig, Coco, and Olivia. The Colorado that I want them to inherit is hopefully going to be one that is filled with abundant economic opportunity. And my concern is that in today's Colorado, that is becoming less and less the case. In November, voters will have a stark choice to make between electing somebody like Jared Polis, who wants to create a Bernie Sanders single-payer health care system that the former Democratic governor and myself were the chair of the effort to defeat, that will bankrupt our state. He wants to create renewable energy standards that economists have told us will cost a minimum of $45 billion, take 230,000 jobs away from Colorado and $32 billion annually to our economy. And just last week, Congressman Polis introduced a bill to try and repeal President Trump's tax plan, which 75% of Coloradans are benefiting from. We cannot afford Jared Polis for my kids or for yours. I need your help and vote. Let's win this thing.
Mr. Stapleton, thank you. Mr. Mitchell, you are up.
Well, it's hard to believe, but 41 years ago, I was sleeping on a floor taking care of a disabled parent. And then today I'm running for the highest office in our state. It just tells you what a tremendous country we really have, both upwardly mobile and anybody can be anything in this country. But I started this journey, 16 months ago. I started my first business when I was 21 years old. I built 6 successful companies. We often base who we're going to vote for, more often than not, based on name identification or maybe how they make us feel, shared values. Maybe that's just not working for us. We elect lots of problem talkers, but very few problem solvers. I've been a complex problem solver my whole career. I put forward big ideas to take on our state bureaucracies. I'm uniquely qualified to move our state forward and, most importantly, to win. We've only elected 2 Republican governors, if you can believe this, in 62 years. We keep electing establishment candidates and we keep losing as Republicans. Let's try something different. Please join my movement. Thank you so much.
Mr. Robinson, you get to close us out.
The stakes are too high. We have an election here where we want, most of all, a Republican who can win. And we can see what the Democrats are going to do. They're going to focus their fire on personal flaws. I'm the only candidate on the stage who doesn't have baggage that is going to be the focus of Democrats' attacks again and again, whether it's Mr. Stapleton's hit and run or election fraud. These are the things that the Democrats are going to focus on. We need a candidate that doesn't have those challenges, that can lead us to build the best state, to live, to work, to raise a family, to fix our roads, to improve our schools. I am not just a talker. I have done it. I have done more from outside the system to solve problems and make a difference for Colorado families. I can lead us to victory and can lead us, make it being a game changer for this state. I hope you'll check me out at dougforcolorado.com. Thank you.
Mr. Robinson, thank you very much. Thank you to all the candidates for a spirited discussion tonight. That was so much fun. We should do it again tomorrow night. I'm telling you. If you missed the Democrats' debate on Monday night, the full hour is posted on 9news.com. This video will go up there later tonight. We encourage you to share both videos with your friends because this year anybody can participate in the party primary process. If you are an unaffiliated voter and you have received 2 ballots, remember, you have to pick one to vote. For Brandon Rittiman, I'm Kyle Clark. Thank you and good night.
One in 7 children in Colorado struggle with hunger.
With school out for the summer, the need to fill food banks is greater than ever.
We need your help.
Donate to the 9 Cares Colorado Shares Summer Drive, Saturday, June 9th. We're collecting food, clothing, and cash. You can donate at 9 News or any of our Front Range locations.
You can also make a donation by purchasing a 9 Cares box at any King Soopers this month.
Visit 9news.com/community for more information.
Let's keep Colorado kids fed this summer.
Need some support for your health goals? It's tough to do it alone. Whether you're trying to lose weight or just tracking your fitness goals, 9 Health has a convenient